Hello fellow writers, my name is Merrin, and I have been writing and publishing fiction stories for around 15 years now. I have learned a lot in that time, and now wish to share those valuable lessons with anyone who will listen. This is one of the primary functions of the Codex channel, the other of which is to share extra content related to my stories. When you're finished with this video, why not pop over to the playlist and learn about the worlds in which I have refined the very techniques I am about to share with you. Whether you are new to the art of writing or an experienced hand, I trust you will find something of use in these little presentations of mine. From simple encouragement to different methodology and fresh perspectives, I aim to offer whatever I can to aid you in your unique journey. What is world building? Today I want to talk to you about world building, which is the process of creating the world in which your story takes place. Some examples include, but are not limited to, mapping out terrain and settlements, naming factions and establishing their principles, and setting up history timelines. Character creation can also be considered a part of this process, but I consider it to be its own thing, which I will be covering in another video. Perhaps the most famous example of this is, and my personal favorite source of inspiration currently, is Tolkien's work for Lord of the Rings. It's simply mind-blowing how much lore there is and its impact on everything that happens in the books. Learning about it is almost like studying actual world history. The thing to remember of this example, however, is that Tolkien spent pretty much his entire life as a fiction writer, and by all accounts many years prior, on this one thing. Personally, I don't have the patience for that, which means my own lore isn't nearly as detailed, and that's okay. We each have our own styles, and I implore you to not lock yourself into thinking you have to match someone else's work. Take inspiration where you can find it, then you do you. Star Wars is another excellent example of expansive and complex world building. What are some of your favorite examples? Let me know. Why do this? You may be wondering why world building is worth any investment of time and effort. If you're anything like me, then you just want to dive right into the story and be swept away by the adventure already burning in your heart. As a matter of fact, that's exactly how I started out. But while this approach does work for a lot of people and perhaps certain genres, I found out it doesn't work for me. Maybe by sharing my experience, I can save you the extra years you'd otherwise need to figure out on your own that doesn't work for you either. For one thing, when I would go back to edit a story, I would discover a lot of things that just did not make sense. Why were these people fighting? What motivates them to keep going? What does everything look like? Where are these places? And how long does it take to get from one to the other? My attempts to fill in the gaps by answering these questions during the editing phase instead of before I started drafting usually created an even bigger mess than if I'd left them unresolved. Everything is connected, so changing one detail meant having to follow its thread through the entire manuscript to make it all match, then go back over the same path after changing something else. Pulling on the wrong thread would cause the whole thing to unravel, sending me back to the drawing board anyway. Most of the time, I just gave up trying and moved on to the next project. This also happens to be the reason I've rewritten and re-released my Embers of Hope series twice. The short answer is that world building is worth the time and effort at the beginning because it will save you a lot of grief later. It is the only way to provide a deep sense of immersion throughout a story, especially if you are writing a series. The more complex your story is, the more this is necessary. My method. So how do I go about this? I'll use my book Humble Glory as my primary example since it was the first book where I set out to do this from the beginning. By the time I go to write anything down, the idea has already lived in my head for quite some time, granting me a certain familiarity with it, which becomes my starting point. Still, nothing is set in stone yet and is subject to change. Before I could do anything else in Humble Glory, I had to choose a setting. My first decision was to go with one based on medieval Europe, and I actually did quite a bit of work on that design. But then I watched a video about how overused that setting is in the fantasy genre, and that made me want to do something different. I've always been fascinated by the Romans, so that society became the next logical source of inspiration for me. Once you have a setting to use as your guiding star, you need to set yourself some ground rules. Realism and an attention to detail is very important to me, so I did some research to brush up my knowledge on how the Romans dressed, their political and military doctrines, and whatever else came to mind. This served me well in creating my own style, while keeping it recognizable and hopefully making some history buffs out there happy. One such example of converting the source culture into something of my own design is the fact I am dedicated to writing clean content. The Romans as a culture were far from being chaste, so I had to determine a reason why the people in my story did not act the same way. I'd heard of the Vestal Virgins before, but didn't know what they actually were, so I did a little research. This new knowledge showed me that even the Romans held religious beliefs centered around abstinence, so it wasn't that much of a leap to weave that into the belief system of my civilization. The need for rules extends beyond any commitment to realism. I chose not to have magic in Humble Glory, but went with a hidden society with incredible technology instead. Either way, if you're going to have any sort of magic, science, and/or technology that either doesn't exist in the real world or isn't well known, then you need to create your own system of rules governing it. These rules can be totally made up, but they must be followed consistently, and any exceptions given a reasonable explanation. Trust me, your readers will thank you for it. Next comes the factions and their relationships to one another. Don't be shy about creating groups you don't expect to actually appear in the story. Their invisible influence on those who do appear will still inform their actions and guide you in laying out the elements of your story. Plus, you never know when you'll need to fill a gap, and this way you will have something ready-made to fill whatever role has popped up. At this point, I like to work backwards. Now that I know all of these things, I ask myself why they are the way they are. Environment plays a crucial role here, such as people being highly aggressive because they live in an area with few resources and must fight to get what they need to survive, or an isolated civilization being rather xenophobic. Then there's the history of that world, such as wars and other conflicts that define ongoing grudges. That about covers it, so I'll leave off here by saying that anything you can think to create for your story world, from clothing styles to religion, is worth doing so. The immersion of your story will be greatly enhanced as a result, and you will be set up with a resource for more stories and/or subplots should you find you want to continue writing in that world. There is a lot more to this than makes sense to put in a single video, but that is enough to serve as a basic breakdown of world building in fiction and my own methodology. I am considering putting together courses on this and other subjects in fiction writing, so do let me know if that is something you'd like to see. In the meantime, check out my other videos here on the Codex or on my other channel, which will be linked below. Don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss any new releases. Until next time, happy writing. Do not lock yourself into thinking. Pippin, you do realize I'm working right now, don't you? Practically ignoring me all day, and now all of a sudden you want all the attention.